They say the most dangerous thing in your life is not your enemy, it's the part of yourself you still don't understand. And the truth is, every day, you are being controlled by people, by situations, and sometimes by your own hidden nature. Not because you're weak, but because you don't yet recognize the dark force inside you. Today, you are going to see something that most people spend their entire lives avoiding, the truth about the 3 dark personality types that quietly shape your behavior, your relationships, and your destiny. And once you see which one you carry within you, you will never look at yourself or the world the same way again. People think darkness is something external, something in others. They never imagine that a piece of that darkness lives inside them too. But Machiavelli was clear. Power doesn't come from being good. It comes from understanding both the light and the shadow in your nature. And the problem is, most people live blind to their shadow. They judge others without realizing they carry similar impulses. They walk into manipulation, betrayal, heartbreak, and disappointment because they don't understand the psychology driving their own decisions. But the moment you recognize your internal pattern, the world stops controlling you. You start controlling it. The first dark personality type is the one people often misunderstand the most. This is the type that craves admiration, attention, and significance more than anything else. At first, they seem confident, magnetic, larger than life. But underneath that glow lies a deep hunger to be seen, to be praised, to be validated. This hunger can make them charming, but it also makes them dangerous. Because the moment you stop feeding their ego, they turn cold. They withdraw affection. They punish with silence. They rewrite the story so they always appear as the hero. Machiavelli would say, this type uses charisma as a weapon. They build an illusion to move people, to inspire loyalty, and to control perceptions. And if you don't recognize this personality within yourself, you will spend your life chasing approval without even realizing why. But here's the twist: almost everyone has a little of this in them. The question is not whether you carry it. The real question is how much it controls you. When admiration becomes a need instead of a choice, you begin to lose power. You make decisions to impress, not to advance. You hold back your truth because you fear disapproval. You become a prisoner of other people's opinions. Recognizing this pattern is not about judging yourself. It's about reclaiming your freedom from the subtle addiction to validation. The second dark personality type is more silent, more strategic, and far more dangerous in the long run. This type doesn't need admiration. They need advantage. They look at life like a chessboard and every person is a potential move. They calculate. They observe. They stay patient. And when the moment comes, they strike with precision. This type isn't driven by emotion. They're driven by outcome. They'll smile with you, talk with you, even support you if it serves a purpose. But the moment you become useless, they detach with zero guilt. Machiavelli himself admired this type because they understand what most people ignore. The world rewards strategy, not sincerity. At their best, they are brilliant planners, problem solvers, visionaries. At their worst, they manipulate quietly, playing behind the scenes while others take the fall. If this personality lives inside you, it can become your greatest strength if you use it consciously. But if you let it operate unconsciously, you may end up damaging the very relationships and opportunities that could have taken you further. Power without awareness always collapses. Strategy without humanity eventually isolates. The key is balance, knowing when to calculate and when to feel. The third dark personality type is the most explosive. This is the type that doesn't hide. They don't plan. They react. They feel deeply, sometimes too deeply. When they're calm, they're warm, protective, intense. But when they're triggered, the switch flips instantly. Anger, jealousy, suspicion, fear, everything rises at once. They can destroy a relationship, a friendship, even their own progress in a single moment because their emotions run ahead of their reason. Machiavelli would say, he who cannot control himself will always be controlled by others, and this personality proves that truth. The world can push your buttons, and without self-mastery, you respond exactly the way others want. But here's the part no one talks about: this personality type is not evil. It is powerful. Their intensity can become courage. Their passion can become loyalty. Their sensitivity can become insight. The problem is not the emotion. The problem is losing control of it. If you see this in yourself, you don't need to suppress your fire. You need to discipline it. A sword is useless without a hand that knows how to hold it. Emotion is the same. Now here's the truth most people avoid. You are not just one of these dark personalities. You are all three, in different amounts. You have the desire for admiration. You have the instinct for strategy. You have the fire of emotion. But depending on which one dominates, your entire life unfolds differently. Some people let ego run their world. Some live purely through calculation. Some are governed by emotion. And the ones who suffer the most are the ones who do not see which one is in charge. Imagine living your whole life making decisions that don't truly belong to you. Imagine being pulled by impulses you never examined. Imagine thinking you're acting freely while your personality type quietly dictates every move. This is how most people live, controlled by what they refuse to acknowledge. But once you identify your dominant darkness, your life begins to shift. You start to catch yourself before repeating old mistakes. You begin to see patterns in your relationships. You stop letting others trigger you. You gain clarity, and clarity is the birthplace of power. Machiavelli taught that understanding human nature is the foundation of influence. If you want to navigate the world without being manipulated, betrayed, or misled, you must first understand the forces within yourself. When you know your type, you also learn to recognize it in others. You see the narcissist before they charm you. You detect the strategist before they use you. You sense the emotional storm before it erupts. And suddenly, the world becomes predictable. Predictability is control. Control is power. But here's the final revelation. Your dark side isn't something to avoid. It's something to master. Ego can give confidence when balanced. Strategy can create success when ethical. Emotion can give passion when disciplined. Your goal is not to eliminate these traits. Your goal is to command them. The moment you learn to use ego without being driven by it, to strategize without losing your humanity, and to feel deeply without losing control, you become someone no one can manipulate. Most people fear their darkness. They suppress it. They deny it. But Machiavelli knew the truth. Power comes from integrating your shadow, not hiding from it. Because the person who cannot understand their dark side will always be at the mercy of someone who does. And the person who studies both their strengths and their shadows becomes unpredictable, unbreakable, and unreachable by the world's attempts to control them. So ask yourself now honestly, which part of you has been running your life? Which instinct has been pulling the strings? Which dark personality has shaped your choices more than you realized? This is not a question to judge yourself. It is a question to free yourself. Because the moment you identify your shadow, you stop being controlled by it. And once you master all three, admiration no longer blinds you, strategy no longer corrupts you, and emotion no longer overpowers you. You become balanced. You become aware. You become dangerous in the most powerful way, not because you wish to harm, but because nothing and no one can quietly pull you anymore. This is the secret most people will never learn. But if you've reached this point, you're no longer most people. You are beginning the journey toward self-mastery, toward influence, toward power, and it all starts with the courage to face your own darkness and command it. When you start to see your darkness clearly, something incredible happens. You stop overreacting to the world. You stop taking things personally. You stop getting confused by people's intentions. Because now, instead of being pulled emotionally, you analyze. Instead of being manipulated by charm, you observe patterns. Instead of falling for someone's confidence, you read the motives behind their behavior. You become calmer, sharper, harder to deceive, and this is where real power begins. Most people never reach this stage because they think self-awareness is about positivity, about polishing their flaws until they look acceptable. But Machiavelli understood something deeper. True strength comes from knowing the part of yourself you are afraid to look at. When you explore that inner shadow, you stop being scared of external shadows. When you embrace your flaws, no one can use them against you. When you become honest about your impulses, no one can manipulate you with guilt, shame, or fear. There is nothing more powerful than a person who knows their own truth. Think about how many times in life you reacted before thinking. How many times ego pushed you into conflict? How many times emotion clouded your judgment? How many times someone used your desire for approval to control you? None of this makes you weak, it makes you human. But the difference between ordinary people and powerful people is simple. Powerful people learn from their reactions. Ordinary people repeat them. There comes a moment when you stop asking, "Why is life doing this to me?" and instead ask, "What inside me keeps falling for the same pattern?" That moment is the beginning of transformation. Once you identify your dominant dark personality, you start seeing the trap before you walk into it. You start seeing manipulation before it touches you. You start seeing your own emotional triggers before they explode. This is how to take your life back. Let's take an example. If your dominant side is ego-driven, you will notice you get hurt when people don't appreciate you. The moment you recognize this, you change the rule. You stop relying on others for validation. You validate yourself. Suddenly, people lose the ability to control you with attention or neglect. You become independent. You become centered. Ego no longer owns you if your dominant side is strategic. You may notice you detach from people too quickly or overcalculate. Once you see that, something amazing happens. You realize you can let people in without losing your power. You can build connections without feeling vulnerable. You learn to lead with intent instead of manipulation. Your sharp mind becomes a tool for growth rather than a shield for fear. If your dominant side is emotional, you may notice how quickly your reactions hijack your decisions. But when you recognize this pattern, you begin to pause. You slow down. You breathe. You become aware of your own fire, and slowly, that fire becomes something you control instead of something that controls you. Your sensitivity becomes intuition. Your intensity becomes strength. Your emotions become your allies. Once you integrate all three sides, you reach a rare state of emotional stability. With strategic awareness and confident presence, a person like this is extremely difficult to manipulate. Why? Because you cannot be controlled through ego, strategy, or emotion. You see through all three. This is what people feel when they meet someone powerful. They can't explain it, but they sense it. That inner stillness, that quiet confidence, that calm gaze that sees everything. You don't need to raise your voice to prove anything. You don't need to chase recognition. You don't need to outsmart everyone. Your presence itself becomes influence. Your awareness becomes your armor. But there's another level one Machiavelli hinted at, but rarely explained directly. It is the power of emotional neutrality. When you master your shadow, you rise above personal drama. You stop getting dragged into other people's emotional storms. You stop wasting energy on petty conflicts. Your mind stays clear, sharp, and unshakable. You become the type of person others come to for guidance, but also the type they cannot deceive. People will notice the shift in you. They'll say you seem colder, but what they're really sensing is control. They'll say you've changed, but what they're really noticing is that you no longer respond to manipulation. They'll say you're difficult to influence, but what they really mean is they can no longer use your emotions, your ego, or your instincts against you. This is when you begin living life on your own terms. You choose who enters your world. You choose what affects you. You choose what you give your energy to. And most importantly, you choose who you become. You are no longer shaped by your dominant personality. You shape it. You sculpt it. You command it. And this is where everything begins to shift: your relationships, your confidence, your decisions, your future. You stop searching for power outside yourself because you finally realize the three dark personalities were never enemies. They were building blocks. And now that you understand them, you hold the blueprint of your own strength. You will still feel ego, but it won't drive you. You will still feel emotion, but it won't drown you. You will still think strategically, but it won't poison your intentions. You become a balanced force, a person who feels deeply, thinks clearly, and moves with purpose. This is the kind of power the world respects, the kind of person people follow, the kind of presence that cannot be shaken, manipulated, or controlled. And here is the final truth. The world doesn't reward the strongest or the smartest. It rewards those who understand human nature, starting with their own. When you mastered your shadows, you stop being controlled by life. You start leading it. You start creating it. You start owning it. When you reach the point where nothing inside you can be used against you, life becomes unbelievably clear. You begin to see people for who they are, not who they pretend to be. You sense intentions before words are even spoken. You notice shifts in tone, energy, patterns. Things you used to ignore now stand out like signals. This awareness doesn't make you paranoid. It makes you precise. You no longer react emotionally to everything around you because you understand the mechanics of human nature. You understand the motives behind behavior. You understand the difference between someone who cares and someone who simply wants something from you. People will try to pull you into their dramas, their insecurities, their chaos. But you won't be pulled. You'll observe. You'll watch. You'll choose consciously. And that choice, your ability to decide instead of react, is the purest form of power. Most people live in automatic mode. They don't think. They respond. They don't choose. They surrender. They don't notice. They assume. But once you've peeled back the layers of your own personality, you step out of the automatic loop. You start living intentionally. You start acting with clarity, not compulsion. There comes a moment on this journey when you realize you are no longer the same person you were before. You don't chase people anymore. You don't need loud validation. You don't need dramatic fires to feel alive. You feel calm in silence. You feel clarity in solitude. You feel power in restraint. That's when you know your shadow is no longer controlling you, you are controlling it. You don't become emotionless. You become emotionally disciplined. You don't become manipulative. You become strategically aware. You don't become arrogant. You become internally whole. People around you will feel this shift even before you tell them. Some will respect it. Some will fear it. Some will distance themselves because they can no longer read you, predict you, or influence you. But the right people, those who value truth, loyalty, and authenticity, will gravitate toward you naturally because powerful people attract powerful connections. The ones who relied on your insecurity, your confusion, your emotional reactions, they will fade away. They cannot survive in the presence of someone who has awakened. As you continue to master these dark sides, something deeper begins to happen. You develop an inner silence of stillness. You don't need to explain yourself constantly. You don't need to justify your decisions. You don't need to win every argument. Your peace matters more than proving a point, and that calmness becomes your signature. People feel it when you walk into a room. They sense the confidence in your posture, the groundedness in your voice, the clarity in your eyes. You no longer feel the urge to dominate others. You simply stop allowing anyone to dominate you. This inner transformation also changes how you pursue success. You no longer chase opportunities out of desperation or fear of missing out. You move with purpose. You build with intention. You choose wisely. You observe long before you commit. Your standards rise. Your patience grows. Your decisions become cleaner, sharper, more powerful. And when you commit fully because you've analyzed the move, balanced the emotion, and put the ego aside. Machiavelli believed that a person who understands both their strengths and their shadows can walk through the world with unparalleled influence. Because when you master yourself, the world loses the ability to surprise you. You stop being thrown off by betrayal because you can see it forming long before it reaches you. You stop being manipulated by flattery because your ego is no longer starving. You stop being overwhelmed by emotion because discipline has taken the driver's seat. This is the kind of mastery kings feared, leaders respected, and enemies could not anticipate. The final transformation is subtle but powerful. You begin to value your time differently. You stop entertaining people who drain you. You stop explaining your worth to those who can't see it. You stop fighting battles that no longer matter. You protect your energy like a fortress because you finally understand that your mind is your greatest weapon. And weapons must be guarded, sharpened, and used wisely. As you walk deeper into this awareness, life becomes less about proving something to the world and more about building something within yourself. You start to crave peace over attention, depth over drama, truth over comfort, growth over approval. You no longer fear being alone because solitude is no longer empty, it is empowering. It is in the silence that you meet your true self, and once you've met that version of yourself, you never tolerate anything less again. And slowly, the world begins to reflect your inner transformation. Opportunities feel more aligned. Relationships feel cleaner. Decisions feel easier. You stop forcing outcomes and start attracting them. That is the hidden reward of mastering your dark personality. Types. You don't just gain control. You gain direction. You gain focus. You gain a sense of purpose that is not shaken by circumstances or opinions. This is what true power feels like, not chaos, not dominance, not fear, but calm, clarity, and control. The world no longer moves you like a puppet. You move through it like someone who finally understands the rules of the game. And once you reach that level, you won't just live differently, you will lead differently, think differently, and rise differently. The world will try to pull you, test you, provoke you, but you will move with a quiet strength that few ever achieve. That is the secret Machiavelli hinted at. The strongest person is not the loudest, the coldest, or the most ruthless. The strongest person is the one who cannot be controlled, not by others, not by circumstances, and not even by their own impulses. And that is who you become when you fully understand the dark personality types that have been silently shaping your life from the inside out. When you begin to understand the darker layers of your own nature, you stop living on the surface of life. You stop operating from impulse or habit. You start seeing the deeper motives that drive people, the hidden desires behind their actions, the quiet fears behind their behavior. It's like someone switched on a light inside your mind, and suddenly everything that once felt confusing becomes clear. You no longer wonder why someone treated you a certain way. You can read it. You no longer question why certain people drift toward you or away from you. You can sense it. You no longer get surprised by betrayal, disappointment, or sudden changes in people's behavior, you expect it because you understand the patterns behind it. This is what happens when you gain control over the darker parts of yourself. You gain control over how you understand the world. Most people think power is loud, aggressive, dominant, but real power is subtle, quiet, almost invisible. Real power is the person who stays calm while everyone else is emotional. Real power is the person who listens instead of reacting. Real power is the person who observes instead of rushing. Real power is the one who sees the game before anyone else even knows they're playing. And you only reach this level when you understand the parts of yourself that once scared you: the ego that used to need validation, the strategic mind that used to manipulate without thinking, the emotional fire that used to erupt without warning. When these parts stop controlling you, you rise above them. You begin to choose your responses instead of being dragged by them. You begin to slow down your mind in moments when others lose theirs. You begin to speak less but say more. Your presence feels heavy, grounded, centered. It doesn't matter whether you walk into a room or sit quietly in a corner. People feel something different about you. They don't know what changed, but they can sense that the old version of you is gone. You no longer carry that frantic energy of someone who needs approval. You no longer give off the emotional turbulence of someone easily triggered. You no longer radiate the calculating tension of someone trying to prove something. Instead, you radiate control. Life becomes a game you understand instead of a storm you fear. You start to anticipate people's moves not because you're suspicious, but because you're aware. You start to protect your energy not out of fear, but out of wisdom. You start to build boundaries not because you're cold, but because you know your value. You stop chasing people not because you're arrogant, but because you no longer need what they can't give. This is one of the greatest transformations that comes from exploring your dark side. You stop negotiating with your own worth. You stop trying to fit into places that diminish you. You stop explaining yourself to people who can't understand you. You become selective. You become intentional. You become precise. Machiavelli believed that the most powerful person is the one who understands human nature better than anyone else, and understanding human nature starts with understanding your own. When you master the impulses inside you, you begin to predict the impulses inside others. When you understand what drives you, you understand what drives everyone. Suddenly, nothing feels personal anymore. People's reactions become predictable. Their motives become transparent. Their behavior becomes readable. You stop taking betrayal personally because you understand the personality behind it. You stop getting angry at disrespect because you can see the insecurity beneath it. You stop getting wounded by silence because you understand the detachment behind it. This is emotional freedom. But the real magic appears when you stop trying to be good or perfect and start trying to be whole. Your light and your shadow become one. You no longer hide pieces of yourself. You no longer lie to yourself about who you are. You no longer deny your flaws, your desires, your instincts. You embrace them with clarity. And when you accept yourself fully, you gain a rare form of confidence, one that cannot be shaken by judgment, rejection, or failure. You stand like a person who has met every part of themselves and fears none of it. People will notice this change long before you do. They'll say you seem harder to read, harder to influence, harder to manipulate. They'll say you seem calmer, more confident, more stable. They'll wonder what happened to you, why you're suddenly so grounded, why nothing seems to break you anymore. But you'll know why. You've stopped running from your shadows. You've learned to sit with them, understand them, command them. And because of that, your darkness no longer leaks out in unpredictable ways. It becomes a controlled force. This is the moment when you stop surviving life and start directing it. You operate with intention. You move with purpose. You speak with clarity. You choose your battles carefully. You stop wasting your emotional energy on things that don't matter. You stop giving access to people who haven't earned it. You stop reacting to every minor inconvenience. You become a person who stays steady while others lose themselves. You become the calm inside the chaos, and once you reach this place, something even more powerful happens. Your relationship with yourself changes. You begin to respect yourself more deeply. You trust yourself more fully. You rely on your intuition with greater confidence. You stop doubting your choices. You stop apologizing for your boundaries. You stop shrinking to make others comfortable. You start expanding. You start rising. You start becoming the version of yourself you always sensed inside, but never had the clarity to step into. This is the true purpose of understanding the dark personalities, not to become someone ruthless, but to become someone complete, someone who sees clearly, someone who decides wisely, someone who lives freely, someone who moves through the world with silent authority. And once you reach that level, the darkness inside you stops being something that controls your life and becomes the power that protects it. When you reach this level of self-understanding, something subtle but powerful begins to happen. You become harder to read. People try to predict you based on an old version of you, but those patterns no longer exist. They expect you to respond the way you used to react the way you once did, to fall into the same traps, but you've outgrown all of it. And the moment others can't predict you, they lose their ability to control you. Human beings fear what they can't control, and they try to control what they can easily predict. But when you become aware of your own dark impulses, when you become conscious of the internal forces that once ruled you, you become a paradox: calm on the outside, powerful on the inside. People sense something different about you. They sense that you're not easily swayed, not easily manipulated, not easily moved, and that unsettles them. Because now the balance of power shifts in your favor. This is where your presence becomes a silent authority. You don't need to raise your voice. You don't need to explain yourself. You don't need to justify anything. Your energy communicates for you. Your decisions speak for you. Your consistency becomes your strength. People begin to treat you differently, not because you demand respect, but because you embody it. And the more control you gain over your own nature, the more you start to see through the illusions of others. You begin to notice how ego drives some people to overcompensate. You see how strategists mask their intentions behind friendliness. You see how emotional personalities let their triggers expose their weaknesses. What once confused you becomes obvious. What once manipulated you becomes predictable. What once hurt you becomes irrelevant. This is how you develop a deeper kind of intelligence, the intelligence that isn't learned from books, but from observing human nature in its raw form. Machiavelli believed that human nature rarely changes, and once you understand its patterns, you can navigate any environment. You can sense danger before it arrives. You can detect lies without evidence. You can predict decisions before they are made. You can avoid conflicts before they explode. And most importantly, you can protect your energy before someone drains it. As you grow in this awareness, you also become more selective. You stop choosing people based on emotion alone. You stop accepting relationships that drain you. You stop entertaining conversations that lead nowhere. Your life becomes quieter, but more powerful. You realize that the fewer people who truly understand you, the safer your mind becomes. You stop performing for approval because you no longer depend on it. You stop chasing validation because you validate yourself. You stop explaining your worth because your actions already prove it. Your boundaries strengthen. Your time becomes valuable. Your attention becomes expensive. And when your attention becomes expensive, people start treating it like it matters. They notice your absence. They respect your presence. They become aware that you are not the kind of person who can be taken for granted. But here's the interesting part: you also become more compassionate, but in a wiser way. You understand why people act the way they do. You see the insecurities behind their ego. You see the fear behind their manipulation. You see the pain behind their emotional reactions. You stop taking things personally because you see the truth behind the behavior. This gives you a kind of emotional maturity most people never develop. You show kindness without becoming a target. You show strength without becoming hard. You show understanding without becoming blind. This is true balance, and balance is power. With time, you begin to rewrite the story of your life with intention instead of instinct. You make choices from awareness, not impulse. You pursue goals with clarity, not desperation. You engage with people from strength, not loneliness. You stop needing the world to define you because you've already defined yourself. And as you step into this new version of your identity, you realize that the darkness inside you was never your enemy. It was your teacher. Every ego-driven decision taught you the cost of seeking validation. Every strategic miscalculation taught you the importance of integrity. Every emotional reaction taught you the necessity of control. Everything you once considered a flaw was actually a doorway to understanding. All of it shaped you, sharpened you, and strengthened you. People spend their lives trying to hide their dark traits, but you have absorbed yours, studied them, mastered them. That makes you different. That makes you powerful. That makes you someone who longer collapses under pressure or bends to manipulation. You've transformed the parts of yourself that once worked against you into weapons of clarity, discipline, and presence. This is the moment when your life truly changes. You walk into rooms differently, you speak differently, you choose differently, you move differently, not because you're pretending to be strong, but because you are strong. Not because you're trying to be confident, but because confidence has become your natural state, not because you're acting wise, but because understanding has become your default, and slowly, the world begins to respond to you in a new way. Opportunities open, people respect you, manipulators avoid you, strong individuals gravitate toward you, weak ones fall away. Your path becomes clearer, sharper, and more aligned with the person you're becoming. And this is the ultimate truth Machiavelli understood. The greatest victory is not conquering others, it is conquering yourself, because once you master your shadow, once you command your inner darkness, once you integrate every part of who you are, no one can influence your mind, dictate your choices, or secretly control your life ever again. When you begin to recognize your own darkness, the entire way you react to the world starts to transform. The same situations that once overwhelmed you now appear clearly, almost silently, as if your mind has stepped out of the chaos and into a higher perspective. Your heart no longer jumps at every emotional jab. Your mind no longer falls for sweet words or fake kindness. And your intuition, sharpened by self-awareness, starts warning you long before someone attempts to influence or control you. You start to understand that power is not given to the strongest or the loudest. It belongs to the one who understands their own impulses, their own wounds, and their own shadow. You realize that your ego, your strategy, and your emotion were never enemies, just untrained forces inside you. But once you see them clearly, you no longer fear them, you no longer suppress them. You learn to work with them, guide them, and use them with intention. Your relationships begin to look different too. You no longer fall for flattery because you know how easily admiration can be used as a leash. You no longer get intimidated by coldness or silence because you understand that those are strategies, not truths. You no longer get dragged into emotional storms because you can now feel the trigger inside you before it explodes. You look at people differently, not with distrust, but with insight. You read motives, you observe patterns. You see the game long before anyone even realizes you're playing, and slowly, the world stops pushing you around. You begin to speak differently, not louder, but clearer. You express boundaries without fear. You say no without guilt. You choose your circle with intention, not desperation. You give your energy to people who bring calm, not chaos. And you begin to carry yourself in a way that makes others step back and wonder what changed in you. They may say you've become colder, but the truth is you've simply become controlled. They may say you've become distant, but the truth is you've stopped tolerating emotional noise. They may say you've changed, but really, you've finally returned to yourself. This transformation doesn't make you untouchable. It makes you unshakable. There's a difference. Untouchable is a wall. Unshakable is a force. Untouchable is fear. Unshakable is mastery. People sense it without you saying a single word. It's in the way you listen quietly, the way you speak with certainty, the way you analyze instead of react, the way you move with purpose instead of impulse. But here's the part most people will never experience. Once you master the dark parts of yourself, even your kindness becomes powerful, not soft, not weak, powerful. Because now your kindness comes from choice, not insecurity. You're not kind to avoid conflict. You're kind because you're in control. You're not calm because you're scared to lose people. You're calm because you've already found yourself. You're not detached because you don't care. You're detached because you finally know what matters. The deeper this awareness grows, the more you begin to shape your life consciously. You stop chasing people who don't value you. You stop explaining yourself to those who don't listen. You stop trying to prove anything to anyone. Your energy becomes precious. Your presence becomes selective, and your silence becomes more powerful than your arguments ever were. And eventually, you reach a state that few people ever reach: emotional neutrality, not the absence of feeling, but the ability to feel without losing control. You become the eye of the storm, still, observant, centered while everything around you moves in chaos. People try to provoke you, and you stay calm. Life throws challenges, and you stay focused. Emotions rise, and instead of drowning, you ride the wave with mastery. This is what happens when you stop being controlled by your dominant dark personality and start commanding it. You become someone who sees through illusions, someone who anticipates manipulation, someone who moves strategically but feels deeply, someone who carries quiet strength instead of loud insecurity. And when you walk into a room with that balanced ego, discipline, strategy refined, emotion mastered, you don't have to demand respect. You attract it naturally. You don't have to prove your worth. People sense it. You don't have to guard yourself constantly. Your awareness protects you. And you don't have to control others. You simply cannot be controlled. This is the kind of presence that changes your life, the kind of inner power that attracts opportunities, reshapes relationships, and elevates your path. The kind of strength that grows not from pretending to be perfect, but from understanding the parts of yourself you once avoided. Because in the end, true power is not about dominating the world. It's about mastering yourself so completely that the world can no longer dominate you. When you begin to recognize the darker parts of yourself, something subtle but powerful begins to change. You stop reacting out of old wounds. You stop giving the world the permission to pull your strings. Instead, you start observing calmly, silently, intelligently. You begin to understand why people behave the way they do, why they push certain buttons, why they say certain things, why they suddenly change, withdraw, or test you. And the most shocking part, you no longer take any of it personally, because now you see the game for what it truly is. You start noticing that every person around you reveals their personality type. Without even realizing it, the ego-driven type exposes themselves through their need for attention. The strategic type reveals themselves through their calculated silence. The emotional type exposes themselves through their impulsive reactions. And because you understand these patterns, you stop feeling confused by people's behavior. Their actions no longer surprise you, they make sense. You can predict them, and prediction is the beginning of control. Slowly, you begin to shift from being someone who responds to life into someone who directs life. You take the driver's seat. You choose what deserves your energy and what doesn't. You choose who gets to come close to you and who stays at a distance. You choose when to speak and when silence is far more powerful. This is where your presence begins to change. You become quieter, more stable, more aware. People can feel something different in you, even if they can't explain it. You also begin to realize how much of your past suffering came from misunderstanding your own nature. How many battles you fought that didn't deserve your energy. How many arguments you entered because your ego demanded to be right. How many disasters you faced because your emotions rushed ahead of your logic. How many manipulations you fell into simply because you didn't understand the strategist hiding behind a friendly smile. But now, all of that becomes part of your education. Every mistake becomes a lesson. Every wow becomes insight. Every betrayal becomes X-ray vision that lets you see people clearly before they ever reveal their intentions. You begin to appreciate the idea Machiavelli emphasized, that understanding yourself is the foundation of understanding the world, and the more you see into yourself, the easier it becomes to see into others. And then something even deeper happens. You stop fearing your shadow. You stop trying to erase the dark parts of yourself. Instead, you integrate them. You make peace with them. You turn them into strengths. You learn to use ego as confidence instead of insecurity. You use strategy as clarity instead of manipulation. You use emotion as passion instead of chaos. You realize that your power was never outside you. It was always inside and tamed, unclaimed, waiting for you to grow into it. People around you will begin to treat you differently. Some will respect you more because they can sense your depth. Some will fear you because they know they can no longer control you. Some will test you just to see if the new version of you is real. And you will pass every test not because you're trying to prove anything, but because you finally understand your own mind. You become someone who doesn't crumble when someone withdraws affection. You don't panic when someone goes silent. You don't chase people who walk away. You don't get manipulated by emotional chaos. You don't fall for charming words. You don't get seduced by surface-level validation. You see the pattern, and because you see it, it has no power over you anymore. The world becomes clearer. Your relationships become intentional. Your decisions become sharper. Your mind becomes quieter. And for the first time, you start feeling something you may not have felt in years. Control. Not the kind of control that dominates others, but the kind that gives you sovereignty over yourself. The kind of control Machiavelli valued above all self-mastery. And once you achieve even a glimpse of this internal power, everything about your life begins to rise. You communicate differently. You walk differently. You think differently. You choose differently. You stop wasting time on what drains you. You stop begging for what isn't meant for you. You stop bending to fit into places you've outgrown. You begin to live with intention, not reaction. And when you reach this level, something incredible happens. The dark personality types no longer control your life. You understand them. You manage them. You use them consciously. And once you're the one in command, nothing and no one can quietly direct your destiny anymore. When you begin to understand the darker sides of your nature, you start moving through the world differently. The noise that once overwhelmed you becomes easy to filter. The people who once confused you become predictable, and the situations that used to shake you lose their power. You start seeing the world with the kind of clarity that others don't have. Not because you became harder, but because you became more aware. You realize that power isn't about being intimidating or loud or dominant. Power is awareness. Power is self-control. Power is understanding what drives you and what drives everyone else. When you reach this level of inner awareness, you no longer get caught in unnecessary arguments. You no longer waste energy proving yourself. You no longer chase the wrong people or the wrong opportunities. Your life becomes quieter on the outside, but sharper on the inside. You start feeling a strange kind of distance from things that once consumed you. Someone's attitude doesn't shake you anymore. Someone's silence doesn't scare you. Someone's rejection doesn't break you, because now you understand why people behave the way they do. You see their wounds. You see their motives. You see their hidden fears. And once you see them, you can no longer be controlled by them. This is the point where you begin to master your internal wiring. You recognize your ego before it controls your reactions. You catch your emotional impulses before they hijack your decisions. You calm your mind before it pulls you into chaos. You notice the early signs, the triggers, the patterns, the impulses, and instead of falling for them, you pause, and in that pause, you find your power. You also begin to understand something deeper. Not every battle deserves your energy. Not every person deserves access to your mind. Not every situation deserves a reaction. You look around and see how drained people are because they fight every small thing. They take everything personally. They chase validation, loyalty, admiration, attention without ever realizing they giving their power away. But you, now, have learned to step back. You have learned that silence is sometimes more powerful than explanation. Distance is sometimes stronger than confrontation, and self-respect is louder than any argument. Slowly, you become someone who doesn't need to prove anything. Your presence becomes enough. People feel something different about you. They can't manipulate you with guilt, or lure you with praise, or shake you with criticism. They sense that your emotions don't control you, your ego doesn't blind you, and your fear doesn't paralyze you. You carry yourself like someone who knows exactly who they are becoming, and the world reacts to this version of you. People start treating you differently. Those who once tested you now tread carefully. Those who once underestimated you now watch you closely. And those who once tried to control you now avoid pushing you, because they can feel you are not the same person you used to be. This shift isn't loud. It isn't dramatic. It's subtle, internal, powerful. It happens when the dark sides within you, ego, emotion, strategy, stop fighting each other and start working together. When your ego gives you confidence instead of insecurity. When your strategy gives you direction instead of manipulation. When your emotion gives you depth instead of chaos. You become a whole person, not a fragmented one, and then a new level of growth begins. You start setting standards for yourself. You start speaking with intention instead of reaction. You start loving with boundaries instead of desperation. You start walking with focus instead of confusion. You start choosing your company carefully, because you understand that energy is not something to waste. Your entire world shifts because your inner world has shifted. You realize that the strongest person in any room is not the loudest, but the most controlled. Not the one who knows everything, but the one who knows themselves. Not the one who plays games, but the one who sees through them. This awareness makes you unpredictable to others and unshakable within yourself. And slowly, you become someone rare, someone who listens more than they react, someone who observes more than they speak, someone who feels deeply but responds wisely, someone who people trust but also fear disappointing, someone whose quietness carries more weight than another person's shouting. This is the power you gain when you master the 3 dark personalities inside you. You stop being ruled by ego, emotion, or strategy. Instead, you become the commander of all 3, balanced, sharp, grounded. A person like this is not controlled by the world. They navigate it with precision, and as this mastery deepens, something even greater happens. You begin building a life that truly belongs to you. A life not shaped by trauma, or impulse, or insecurity, but shaped by clarity, intention, and awareness. You start attracting the right people, making the right decisions, and walking away from what no longer serves you. You become someone who isn't just surviving, but shaping their own fate. And in the quiet of your own mind, you finally understand the truth. The darkness inside you was never your enemy. It was your teacher, your guide, your power.